أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The key to the straight path. But before we proceed, there is another problem to be considered, the answer to which would open the door to a new and more comprehensive understanding. It would seem that in order to define the straight path, it should have been sufficient to call it the path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the path of the Qur'an, which should also have been more succinct and more explicit. For the whole of the Holy Qur'an is really an explanation of the straight path and the teachings of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, an elaboration. But setting aside the succinct and explicit form of expression, the Holy Qur'an has taken up two verses of this short surah for defining and delimiting the straight path positively and negatively, and has thus indicated that if one wishes to follow the straight path, one should seek such and such men, those on whom Allah has bestowed His grace, and adopt their way. Here, the Holy Qur'an does not ask us to follow the path of the Qur'an, for a book alone is not sufficient for the grooming of man, nor does it ask us to follow the path of the Prophet, for the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not to be in this world forever, and no other Prophet was to come after him. So, in enumerating those whose teaching and example can help us attain the straight path, the Holy Quran has, besides the Prophets sallallahu alaihi wasallam, included those two who will always be found living amongst us till the last day of the world, namely the Siddiqeen, the Shuhada, and the righteous. For the purpose of indicating the manner in which one can find the straight path, the Holy Quran has thus referred not to a book but to a certain man. According to a hadith, when the Holy Prophet ﷺ informed his companions that, like earlier communities, his ummah too would be divided into 70 or 72 sects, and that only one among them would be on the right path, they wanted to know as to which group it would be. The answer he gave also leads on to certain men of Allah, for he said, "Ma ana alayhi wa ashabi," that which follows my way and the way of my companions. All this comes to mean that written books or oral traditions alone cannot teach, train, and discipline man. For this, one has to be with knowing man and learning from them. In yet other words, the real teacher and groomer of man has to be another man. A book cannot take place all by itself. How curtly this was pointed out by Akbar, the famous Urdu poet, humorist, who said, कोर्स तो लफ्ज ही सिखाते हैं, कोर्स तो लफ्ज ही सिखाते हैं, आदमी आदमी बनाते हैं, which in English comes close to saying courses teach words, but men train men. This truth holds good even for spheres of everyday life. No one has ever become a doctor or an engineer or even a cook or a tailor merely by reading a book. Similarly, studying the Holy Quran and the Hadith on one's own cannot by itself be sufficient for the moral, spiritual education and training of a man. Such a study must be carried on under the guidance of a specialist or a genuine scholar before it can be useful. It is common observation that many people today, though otherwise educated, cherish the erroneous notion that one can acquire a masterly knowledge of the Holy Quran and Hadith merely by reading a translation or at best a commentary. The explanation of the sentence where it says it is common observation that the writer writes under the influence of the West, particularly that of Protestantism, and the other is the illusion has been encouraged by the modernistic or pseudo-modernistic interpretations of Islam. Had a book in itself been sufficient for the guidance of men, there was no need for the prophets to be sent. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in sending us His book, has also sent His prophet to serve as a teacher and guide, and defining the straight path too. He has also enumerated those of His servants who find special favor with Him, all of which argues that in trying to understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to act upon it, one cannot solely rely on one's own study and judgment, but must turn to someone who knows. The conclusion. Two things are necessary for the physical and spiritual well-being and success of man: the book of Allah, which contains guidance for every sphere of human life, and the man of Allah, who help in making this guidance effective. The way to profit from the man of Allah is to assess them according to the well-known principles of the book of Allah. Those who do not conform to these principles should just not be regarded as men of Allah. But when one has found men of Allah in the real sense, one should seek their guidance in order to understand the meaning of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and act upon it. Why the schism? As to sectarian differences on this point, we may remark that there are two kinds of deviations in this respect. Some people elected to follow the book of Allah alone, ignored the men of Allah totally, and gave no value to their teachings and explanations. Conversely, others adopted the man of Allah as the only criterion of truth and become indifferent to the book of Allah. Both these ways lead to fatal error.